You'd think a home nestled in a cul-de-sac lined with magnolias and trimmed lawns would feel safe, peaceful. But I learned long ago, stillness isn't always safety. Sometimes it's just silence choking the truth. My name is Evelyn Rourke, and this was supposed to be the life I'd built for myself. A beautiful house in Wilmington, North Carolina. A husband who had once swept me from the wreckage of my childhood. Blake was charming, persuasive, protective. At first. But over time that protection became something else. Something colder. I used to think I was choosing things. What to wear, who to see, how I spent my time. But then Lydia stopped calling. Blake said she was toxic, that she tried to turn me against him. He deleted her texts by accident more than once. He said it was better this way. Less stress for the baby I wasn't even sure I wanted yet. He managed my schedule for convenience. Took over our finances to keep us on track. Every time I questioned anything, he'd say, "I'm just helping, Evelyn." One afternoon, I walked past the study and heard Blake's voice, low, pointed. "You raised her too soft, Margaret." I paused, hidden by the wall. My mother replied, "Well, she's not as sharp as Sienna, but she listens." The words slid down my spine like ice. I had always wondered if I was shaped by love or by some mold they carved without asking. That night, lying in our too-firm bed beside a man I couldn't call kind anymore, I whispered to myself, was I ever loved? Or just manageable? I used to think my story started with Blake. But truthfully, it started with the house I grew up in. A house where shadows didn't just fall, they lingered. I remember being 12, watching Sienna twirl in the living room while Margaret clapped and cheered like she'd just won Miss America. When I brought home straight A's, Margaret barely looked up from her crossword. "Try smiling more, Evelyn," she'd say. "You look tired when you frown." Dad, Howard, would just hum and bury himself in his woodworking. He wasn't cruel, just absent. I think he believed silence was peace. It wasn't. Margaret had a photo in her room. A baby boy who died before Sienna was born. She never talked about him, but I saw how she looked at that photo. Maybe that's why she poured all her tenderness into Sienna, trying to patch a hole that couldn't be patched. I started writing in a notebook I kept hidden under my mattress. I never wrote poetry, just facts, feelings, truths no one else seemed to want. One entry read, "I live in a house that doesn't echo. Even my pain is quiet." A school counselor once tried to talk to me. She called home, tried to arrange a meeting. Margaret shut it down. "My girls are fine. Maybe you should focus on the students who are actually struggling." No one brought it up again. Years later, after the wedding, after the move, I hosted a small dinner for my family. Just my parents, Blake, and Sienna. I wanted it to be normal. I roasted chicken, lit candles, even used the cloth napkins from our wedding registry. We sat around the table like a real family. I thought I saw Howard flinch at something, but when I followed his gaze, Blake and Sienna were just close, too close, whispering, laughing under their breath. "Wine?" I asked louder than I meant to. They looked up, smiled. Too smooth, too in sync. Later that night, Blake and I argued about nothing. A spilled glass, the thermostat, the wrong tone of voice. Then he snapped, grabbed my wrist, pushed me into the bedroom, locked the door. "Cool off," he said. From the other side of the door, Margaret's voice floated in. "Stop provoking him, Evelyn. He works hard." I sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing. Not from fear, from the realization that this wasn't my home. Not really. I wasn't a wife. I was a prisoner with matching pillowcases. And this wasn't the first time I'd been trapped by silence. A few months earlier, I'd had a miscarriage. No one talks about it anymore. Not that they ever really did. It happened after a stupid fight in the kitchen. Sienna bumped into me, hard. I slipped. Fell. Pain like I'd never felt before. They blamed stress. Margaret said, "Some women just aren't built for motherhood." Blake didn't speak for days. When he finally did, it was about bills. But I remembered the blood. I remembered the loneliness of the hospital bed. That week, I found an envelope in the mail from someone I hadn't thought about in years, Mrs. Lambert, my high school English teacher. She'd written, "I'm sorry I never said anything. I saw the bruises in 10th grade. I should have done something." I cried for the first time in months. Not for the baby. Not for Blake. For me. That night I packed a single duffel bag. Left my wedding ring on the nightstand. I knocked on Howard's door after dark. He opened it and said nothing. Just stepped aside and let me in. The guest room smelled like cedar and dust. I lay on the twin bed and stared at the ceiling fan, watching it spin and spin. "This isn't over," I whispered to the dark. "Not by a long shot." I didn't expect balloons or a cake. Not this year. But the silence, that hit differently. I woke up on my birthday to nothing. No messages. No calls. No card slipped under my door. I told myself it was fine. Grown women don't need validation from people who forgot them years ago. Still, it stung. Howard noticed, of course. He offered brunch at the diner near the river. I smiled, said yes. The eggs were too salty and the coffee too thin, but his company steadied me. Lydia texted a meme of a cat wearing a birthday hat, followed by, "You're too old for parties anyway, winky face." I laughed too hard at it, maybe because it was the only acknowledgement I got. Walking home, I passed a bookstore. Outside, a little girl was opening presents, surrounded by family. Her face lit up when someone handed her a glittery box. My chest tightened. I backed away and gripped the edge of a lamppost, breath caught in my throat. Just a minute. Just a moment. When I made it back to the townhouse, a small box sat by the door. No card. No name. Inside was the tablet I'd loaned Blake during our first year of marriage. I didn't recognize it at first, until I saw the cracked corner. It felt like holding a ghost. I charged it out of instinct. Swiping through old files, I meant to delete everything. Start fresh. But a folder titled Notes caught my eye. There were voice memos, 23 of them. I pressed play. Laughter. Sienna's voice. Blake's chuckle close behind. "After the baby," she said. He replied, "We'll keep it quiet. She's fragile." I dropped the tablet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I backed it all up to the cloud and put the device in a drawer. I didn't tell Howard. Didn't call Lydia. I walked to the lake and sat on the bench where ducks usually gathered. It was empty. So was I. I remembered Sienna once asking me, "Are you really in love with him, or just grateful he picked you?" At the time, I thought it was just a sister being snide. Now I knew better. I booked an appointment for a prenatal DNA test the next morning. No drama. No fanfare. I whispered to the growing swell beneath my shirt, "If this is real, they don't get to erase me." A week later, Sienna texted, "Family dinner this weekend? Margaret wants to celebrate my promotion." I stared at the message. My fingers hovered, then typed, "Wouldn't miss it." I wore red. Not a bright red. Blood red. The kind you remember. I walked in with a folder tucked under my arm and my phone in hand. Margaret was already mid-toast. praising Sienna's drive and resilience. Blake raised a glass with that same smug ease I used to call charm. "Here's to new beginnings," he said. I stood. "I'd like to share something, too." They turned. The clinking stopped. I pressed play. Sienna's laugh filled the dining room. Blake's response followed, unmistakable. "She's fragile." Margaret froze. Sienna's fork dropped. Blake blinked like someone slapped him. I handed copies of the DNA test down the table, like a waitress with menus. "This baby is not yours, Blake." No one moved. Margaret snatched her paper, scanned it, then tore it to shreds. "You're jealous," she spat. "You're unstable." I smiled. "No, I'm finally sane." Blake lunged, hand raised, jaw tight. But Howard stepped between us, grabbing his wrist midair. Then a voice from the doorway. I saw them. Once. Lydia. She hadn't said she'd come. "They were kissing behind Evelyn's car," she added quietly. Gasps. Whispers. I turned to the room. "You all knew something was off. You just liked her better." I walked out as calm as a breeze. Lydia followed. Howard trailed behind, silent but solid. Inside, Margaret cried into Sienna's shoulder. "Not mine. Never mine." Outside, the flashing lights of a local news van lit up the night. Someone had leaked the story. I didn't know who, but this time the truth was louder than my silence. After the dust settled and the cameras faded, I became Evelyn Rourke again. No hyphen, no shared bank account, no legal tie to Blake. It felt less like a return and more like a beginning. I changed my number, moved into a small bungalow near the edge of Asheville, and started working full-time with a local nonprofit that supported women exiting abusive relationships. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was helping others do the same. Caleb Moreno, the quiet but sharp-eyed lawyer who helped finalize the divorce and custody arrangement, became a trusted guide. He knew when to speak and when to just sit across the table in silence. The court allowed Blake's family limited, supervised visits with the baby. I didn't fight it because some battles aren't worth waging. A package came one afternoon. No return address. Inside, a letter from Margaret. Not an apology. Just explanation. I didn't read it. I placed it in a drawer and let it stay unopened. Some truths don't need to be heard to be known. The nonprofit won a small grant, and I was asked to speak at a local church auditorium. I stood in front of 50 women, most with lines carved into their faces by time and hurt. I told them, justice doesn't always arrive in courtrooms. Sometimes it's who you choose not to become. Later that week, I got a text from a friend. "Blake's crying on TikTok." I watched the video once. He said I ruined his life, that I poisoned his family. The comments were split. Some called him brave. Others called him manipulative. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted a single article on Medium titled, "Who Really Survives?" I never mentioned names, but the words cut clean. Calm. Clear. It spread faster than any video he ever made. Margaret visited Howard at the care facility. He was weak now, more memory than man. She cried and told him she always knew, that she couldn't bear to lose both daughters. While sorting old documents in his drawer, I found a folded paper with my name on it. My adoption papers. I wasn't her child, not by blood. It wasn't rage I felt, it was clarity. Her distance, her bitterness, it wasn't born of conflict. It was fear. Fear of the woman before her, the one who gave birth to me, the one Howard must have loved before Margaret. I was never her mistake. I was her threat. One Tuesday afternoon, Someone knocked. A boy, maybe 9, stood on my porch. Brown eyes, nervous shoulders. Behind him, a woman, Joanne. "I'm Henry," he said. "My mom's Sienna. They say you're the bad guy in the story." I didn't answer. I pulled out a photo of Blake, Sienna, and me, years ago before lies had names. "That was before they lied," I said. Joanne sat quietly on the couch. "He's heard too much. Not enough of the truth." Henry watched me, waiting. "We forget how much kids remember." "He just wants to know," Joanne whispered. "Who to trust." I nodded and handed him a small notebook. Inside were entries from the year everything broke. Nothing graphic, just real. Later that night, I opened Margaret's letter. It ended with, "He should call you Mom." I didn't cry. I just exhaled. I told Joanne if something ever happened, or if Sienna couldn't provide, I'd take him. Not as a replacement, but as a promise. The week Howard passed, Caleb visited. He brought paperwork. "There's a clause," he said, "in the estate. You refused your portion, so it's being donated legal aid for women." I didn't remember doing that. Maybe I'd instructed it during a blur of paperwork and grief. Or maybe Caleb had read between the lines. The press got hold of it. The woman who lost everything gave everything back. At Howard's funeral, I stood by the casket with Henry beside me. Sienna didn't come. Margaret sent flowers with no card. Caleb squeezed my shoulder and said, "You didn't win." I smiled. "Same thing." Henry looked up at me, voice small but clear. "So who am I in all this?" I knelt, placing my hand over his heart. "You're the proof they didn't break me.